Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this webinar entitled Is Iran Nuclear Deal a Threat to Peace and Security in the Middle East and the EU? Israel Prime Minister has called on the US and its allies to wake up to the threat of Iran as talks still revive a landmark deal to limit the country's nuclear program. Iran elected hardliner Ibrahim Raisi, the country's top judge, who holds ultra-conservative views, as a new president. It is an exceedingly race widely seen as being designed to favor him. The president-elect is under US sanctions and has been linked to past executions of political prisoners. Negotiations for the 6 signatory countries, the US, UK, France, China, Russia, and Germany, and Iran are holding talks since April to revive the deal, which saw Iran limit its nuclear activities reciprocally for sanctions relief. Iran, however, has been violating the deal since the US unilaterally left it. Iran continues to be the greatest single threat to stability within the region. As the highest US general for the Middle East said. Despite the continued malign activities of Iran and its proxies across the region, Washington isn't trying to have war with Iran. Iranian-backed militias still target bases in Iraq that host US forces and contractors. The Israel-Hamas conflict was a reminder that almost everything within the Middle East is connected. And whether we are talking about Hamas rockets, the continuing calamity in Yemen, the Iran nuclear deal, Tehran has a destabilizing role within the region, and which is the common thread between all the atrocities that the Arab world and the Middle Eastern region is witnessing. To tackle this important issue, we have today a panel of high-level speakers and experts from the Middle East and Europe to enlighten us regarding the Iran threat for peace and security in the Middle East. Without any further delay, I leave the floor to Dr. Mordechai Kedar, who is an expert in Israeli Arab culture. He served for 25 years in IDF military intelligence, where he specialized in Islamic groups, the political discourse of Arab countries, the Arabic press and mass media, and the Syrian domestic arena. He holds a PhD from Bar Ilan University. He is fluent in Hebrew, Arabic, and English, and he is described as, I quote, one of the few Arabic-speaking Israeli pundits seen on Arabic satellite channels defending Israel, end of quote. Thank you, Dr. Mordechai, for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Manal, and thank you very much to everyone who is here. And I have a very, very short message, or I would say double message. One message is that freedom is not given on a silver platter. The Iranian regime, whether it is the secular Shah regime or this so-called religious mullah regime, of the Persians actually, they will not give freedom to any of the minorities, neither the Arabs or the Turkmens or the Azeris or the Kurds or the Baloch or whatever. They will never, especially to the Ahwaz, because of the oil and the gas. Freedom is being taken by force. As you know, in Arabic, al-hurriya tuntaza' la tu'ta.
صح.
Meaning, you have to grab the freedom rather than take it or being given. It is everywhere, especially in Iran. So whoever wants freedom should prepare himself or herself to sacrifice. People are going to be killed. People are going to be injured. People are going to go through very, very hard time. And the Iranians, Persians, know very well how to give hard time to other people. To hang them, to shoot them, to rape the girls and the women. And they know very well how to do these things, unfortunately. Whoever wants to enjoy freedom has to go through long and hard path of agony, of suffering, of fight, which will have setbacks. But in the end of the tunnel, there is a light. And we Jews know it because we did it. We were struggling against our neighbors, against Britain, and many of us just came from the ashes of Europe after the Holocaust, and we did it. It cost a hell of a lot of blood, suffering, but we made it. Other nations made it as well. The Serbs, the Croats were freed from the Yugoslavian country, and others as well. And my message to everyone, to the Ahwazis and the Kurds and all the other minorities in Iran, if you guys want to enjoy freedom, be prepared to pay the price in blood, mainly, and in other things as well. This is one message. The second message is unity. The unity within every group means unity between the Arabs of the Ahwaz and unity between the Kurds of the Kurdistan and the unity between the Baloch of Balochistan and so forth. This is one unity which is necessary. No, it's vital. Without this, forget it. You have to be united and leave the quarrels and leave the fights and leave the disputes to the freedom time. When you are free, you can fight. The Islamists can fight against the liberals, and the liberals against the Islamists, and the tribes, and all the fights leave for the time after the freedom. We'll have enough time then to have a state and to fight each other. It's okay. Here with Israel also, we fight each other. The liberals against the religious and against the Arabs, okay, but we have freedom to fight within ourselves. This one kind of unity within every group. The other kind of unity is between the groups. Means the Ahwazis should speak to the Kurds, and they together should speak to the Azeris, and together they should be coordinated with the Baloch and with the Turkmens and the Lurs and the Mazdandarani, and whoever joins this issue of freedom. And in my view, you all have to decide on one day, one date, that everyone, the Ahwazis, the Kurds, the Azeris, and the Baloch, and all the others, will run to the streets in one day or one night to burn police stations, army bases, government institutions, and to put havoc, hell, to the Persians. If everybody does it together, all the sectors, the students, the bazaar, whatever, whoever, everybody runs to the streets together, and all the minorities in one night, they cannot resist. They will not be able to deal with all the intifadas all around Iran. And this is what I mean by unity. To decide on a day, and they will know it, of course. They have their intelligence everywhere, and they will know. But they will have nothing to do because they cannot arrange a new army within a month, since they will know the date. Maybe Shahar Shanbeh Suri in like 5 months from today. It will be in March. Maybe this is the time. I don't know. It's for you to decide. But you have to decide with all of them and agree with all of them, all of the other minorities, about one day or one night or 1 hour, let's say midnight of Shahar Shanbeh Suri, and everybody runs to the streets to burn them all and to fight them all with everything. And if all the minorities together, which is actually the ring around the Persians, because they are in the center or in the middle, and the minorities are around them, they are surrounded by minorities which will run to the streets in order to shake them to death. And this, I think, can work if it is well prepared and people are enough charged with a will to get freedom. Of course, the state will fight, no doubt. They will try. But if half of the population of Iran burst to the streets in order to fight, the Iranian regime will not survive. They will collapse. They will start fight each other because they will see that they cannot do it. And this is your winning your freedom from them. This is my short advice, or 2 advices. First of all, to be prepared, to prepare the people to sacrifice, and to coordinate, cooperate, and do it with others together in 1 minute, which Iran will start to burn under the feet of the regime. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mordechai, for these pieces of advice, and thank you for your positive message about unity and strength. And we in Belgium, we say l'union fait la force, and it's really important that we keep united to be strong, and especially the minorities, religious minorities, the opposition. Everybody should be working together in order to stop this regime and to stop massacres and persecutions. I would like also to welcome Mr. Hamid Matchar, who is the president of the Liberal Ahwazi Party, who is joining us. And thank you, Mr. Hamid, for joining us. We are really honored to have you today. Also, I have a message from Mrs. Eileen Kohanim, former U.S. Deputy Special Envoy to combat anti-Semitism. She wanted to join us today, but unfortunately, she is not available. But she's really happy to join us for another webinar next time. I would like to give the floor now to Miss Lina Kabi, one of the young female leaders, Ahwazi leader, and Dr. Mordechai spoke about women and the fight for freedom, especially for women. And we know that in Iran, women are really persecuted. They are denied their liberal individual freedoms, their rights, especially the right to put or not to put the veil. And Mrs. Lina is one of these examples for fighting for freedom, for dignity, and for independence. Miss Lina is someone who is engaged with the Women Ahwazi Initiative, and she is now she's member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Asmala, a human rights activist on Ahwazi women issues, and she is also an expert in international relations. Miss Lina, we are really honored to have you today. The floor is yours. Can you unmute yourself, Miss Lina?
I'm so sorry. Thank you very much, Dr. Manal. Good day, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm so happy to be part of this important conference as an Ahwazi woman. Thanks for Dr. Mordechai for his influential and positive speech also. Actually, the struggle of the Ahwazi woman is not a new phenomenon, as women in Ahwaz have been playing influential roles in struggling for peace and freedom since the occupation of Ahwaz in 1925 until today. Fundamentally, understanding the Ahwazi just cause requires us to comprehensively study it from various dimensions and to understand the root cause behind its occupation by the Pahlavi regime, and especially to understand the struggles of the Ahwazi women and their influential roles in liberalizing our occupied country. A forgotten Arab region, which is located on the southeast of Iraq and on the eastern coast of the Arabian Gulf, starting from the Strait of Hormuz to the Shatt al-Arab, and which has been inhabited for thousands of years by the Arab people. And after the discovery of black gold or oil, it was illegally invaded and occupied by the Pahlavi regime. Basically, the root cause behind this unjust occupation is Ahwaz's uniqueness and complexity in terms of geoeconomic, geopolitical, and geostrategic aspects at the regional and international levels. Its unique geographical location, in addition to valuable natural resources, have made it highly influential in international equations. Hence, it has been a strategic region for Iranian regime to fulfill its selfish economic, security, military, and political interests at the expense of innocent Arab Ahwazi people. Accordingly, the regime attempts to harm and destabilize the international equations through sponsoring criminal terrorist militias in the Middle East and other parts of the world. However, Ahwaz has the full potential in positively affecting the international equations, and thus its liberation will certainly benefit the whole region and the world. And I am confident that through shedding light on women's issues in Ahwaz and supporting women empowerment, we would be able to successfully achieve ultimate freedom and peace in the region. Ahwazi women have specifically played influential roles in struggling against the occupation. And since the occupation of Ahwaz, they have actively participated in various uprisings. And recently, we could observe many Ahwazi women facing the Iranian security forces during the July 3rd uprising. For instance, the brave Ahwazi woman who chanted in the middle of shootings, land, water, and honor. But unfortunately, our women today are suffering from various issues such as absolute poverty, discrimination, marginalization, repression, oppression, forced migration, unemployment, imprisonment, torture, execution, and etc. It is noteworthy that the regime targets our women through various approaches such as the forced sterilization surgery in order to perform its racist demographic change project. According to reliable Ahwazi human rights sources, the hospital staff hired by the government deliberately prevent Arab women from having natural births in order to reduce the Arab population. Ahwazi women also complain about inadequate medical centers specialized for women. And based on sources, during pregnancy, they are intentionally deprived of receiving the necessary care and treatment, and the hospital staff are instructed by the government's official to neglect the Arab woman. Also, there have been many cases where the Arab women are treated inhumanely by this hospital staff during their deliveries. In addition, the current water crisis has exacerbated the situation for women as the unsafe and polluted water has increased the female-specific diseases in Ahwaz. And despite all these challenges, our women protest and take roles in human rights activities, but they get detained in the Iranian's most notorious prisons. Recently, the regime had detained 3 women activists, including Zahra al-Boghobaish, Fatima al-Tamimi, and Maryam al-Ameri, who did nothing except peacefully promoting the Ahwazi national identity and culture. Additionally, they detain and torture the female family members of the Ahwazi activists. For example, we had Fahima Badawi, she was the wife of one of the Ahwazi human rights activists. She did nothing except being the wife of that person, and she was detained for many years in the Iranian notorious prison. And based on reliable human rights sources and interviews with women who have been in the prison and they later got released, these innocent women, even the young girls below 20, they physically and psychologically get tortured by the Iranian regime. Also, I would like to mention the Arabic language, which our children in Ahwaz are deprived from to study and to learn in Arabic. And the Ahwazi mothers suffer a lot because the children's mother language is Arabic. And when they go to the school, the teachers treat the children, the Arab children, unfortunately, in a very bad and inhuman way. Also, I would like to highlight the Ahwazi women farmers who have been dependent on agriculture for securing their livelihoods, but the deliberate drying of the rivers has caused majority of them to migrate and to lose their jobs and to migrate to urban or Persian areas. And when they move to the Persian areas, they face more discrimination, they face more brutality by the Iranian government and some of the Persians also. And interestingly, despite all these issues, our women in Ahwaz, they love education and they are completing their education, although they are unable to be employed because all of the employment opportunities are only offered to the settlers, Persians and Lords, but still our women are bravely completing their education in different fields such as politics, human rights, sports, arts, and etc. And I would really like to call on the international community, all the international organizations, the UNICEF, United Nations, to take care and support the Ahwazi women and the children, because an Ahwazi woman, she deserves an international recognition and support internationally because she is a human being and she is a woman. And I really also send my regards to anyone who believes in humanity. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lina Kabi, for your testimony and for this inclusive speech in which you describe the suffering of Ahwazi women. We know that the international media don't focus, let's say, on a daily basis on this issue, especially when it has to do with, let's say, with the Iranian regime. We always focus on Iranian women and what we call the Iranian Spring, but we always forget the minorities and the other peoples like Baluchi or Kurds or Azeris and Ahwazi, and we don't focus on these women who are fighting every day. They are cultural activists, they are political activists, they are teachers, and fighting every day for equality, for justice, for human rights, and especially for freedom. Thank you so much. And I move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Khalaf El-Kabi, who is head of Foreign Affairs Committee of ASMLA. And also, he is a political activist engaged in, in social and political events everywhere. And he holds an MBA in shipping business and PhD law and PhD in law in politics. Dr. Khalaf Kaabi is entered politics when he was so young in Iran, and then he was also targeted by the regime. So he left Iran, and he lives now in London. So I leave the floor to Dr. Khalaf to speak about the Ahwazi, let's say, quest for freedom and justice. Thank you, Dr. Khalaf.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manal. Many thanks for Dr. Mordechai and Lena, and thanks a lot to Precious. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Hope all of you are keeping well and safe. God Almighty blesses all of our efforts. God, Allah, commands us to be kind and to love others and to stay away from hatred and differences. I would like to take the opportunity to thank you for your participation in this webinar, which is going to shed light on the regime of Iran's conspiracies against the entire Middle East and beyond. I am immensely happy to see things are changing, and we and our Israeli brothers getting closer to each other. This fraternal relationship would enable all of us to build a peaceful world for our next generation and secure a sustainable peace in the Middle East and other parts of the world. We are here to condemn the regime of Iran for struggling to acquire nuclear weapon, and that is one of their deadly objectives, which is against the regional and international stability. The nuclear reactors in Bushehr and Durkhwayn poses a great danger to the safety of the Ahwazi people and the entire Arabian Gulf. The regime had tested different types of deadly weapons on the Ahwazi soil. We have fear, and it is possible that the regime will use these weapons against our Ahwazi people and the entire region. From this standpoint, we demand the international community to pressure the regime of Iran to stop its nuclear activity in Bushehr and Darkhwayn reactors and other facilities as well. As you know, the regime of Iran is not qualified to maintain the security of such complicated and sophisticated technology and facilities, even if it is peaceful. Secondly, we are aware and certain that the Iranian regime is working on developing nuclear weapons. Hence, the region is getting into a dangerous nuclear race, which is going to be catastrophic. Thus, it is on the International Nuclear Agency to take the necessary steps against the regime of Iran before signing the nuclear deal with the filthy regime of Iran. The filthy Iranian regime seeks complete control over the Middle East, countries and peoples of the region. Therefore, the regime deployed their terrorist militias in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, and Gaza to destabilize the entire region and other parts of the Middle East. The governments of the region should take all the necessary measures against the arrogant mullahs regime in order to end the conspiracies against the people forever. We have mentioned this over and over again, that the illegal Iranian regime has destructive goals for the entire region. So we ask our Arab and Israeli brothers to stand by our side and work on clear strategies that enables us to reduce the pressures on the Ahwazi people who are suffering from injustice, prison, torture, and the indiscriminate executions. As you are fully aware that the backward and brutal regime of Iran is persecuting our Ahwazi people, Baluchis and South Azerbaijanis, and Kurds on a regular basis. Thus, it is on the UN and the regional governments to take the necessary stance against the regime's nuclear ambition before it is too late. As you know that the Iranian regime is trying to change all the equations in its favor, hence to control of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, and to spread the strife and hatred among the peoples to complete its destructive projects in the Middle East. Imagine such a regime possessing a nuclear weapon. What should be done if the mullahs of Tehran were able to acquire nuclear weapons? And what would be the danger to the nations of the Middle East and the entire world? Without doubt, the situation will be catastrophic. We see how the mullahs deal with the nations now and what it would be like if they obtained a nuclear weapon. Therefore, we insist on stopping the Iranian nuclear program, which poses a threat to the entire world. We had a lengthy discussion with a few Arabian countries decades ago that the regime of Iran would pose a threat to peace and security in the Middle East in general, and Arabian Gulf in particular, and would spread its militias in different parts of the Middle East. But the response was illogical and not based on security strategies. Today, we see how dangerous this extremist regime is, which wants to destabilize the region and the entire world. We must tell the truth that our brothers in Israel took action against this arrogant regime and also supported the oppressed Ahwazi people whose land and rights were stolen from them. Also, the support of the Baluchis and Azeris and the Kurds was a clear political qualitative move. This support changed all equations in the region in favor of the oppressed peoples. We, the Arab Struggle Movement for the Liberation of Al-Ahwaz, work according to the international law, but the Iranian regime fabricates all the facts in its favor in Al-Ahwaz and abroad to strike the movement and to prevent us from educating our Ahwazi people to know their legal rights. Our oppressed Ahwazi people who are suffering from thousands of difficulties and the crimes wish to be part of the international community. Our Ahwazi people who is supposed to be the richest nation of the Middle East live on less than $50 a day. 90% of the Ahwazi people live below the poverty line. Ahwazi wealth are spent on terrorism and their militias in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon and Gaza. Excuse me. The Ahwazi people are known for their generosity and hospitality, loving life, love poetry and arts. These people can create an integrated economic climate that benefits the people of the Middle East and the whole world. We aspire to have a roof over all Ahwazis and a decent life. The people who should contribute to building a classy society have been deprived of their primitive rights. Add to all problems, the criminal regime is trying to displace us from the lands of our fathers and forefathers and replaces it with non-Ahwazi people in order to change the demographic system. Excuse me. Today we have a style and discourse that opens to all nations of the world, and that at the same time we have people who understand the political and social situation in the region and beyond. Therefore, giving our people the opportunity to rise would be for the benefit of the peoples and countries of the region, to build bridges of cooperation between different countries. Of course, Al-Ahwaz will be the starting point for many countries in the region, especially the countries that supported the Ahwazi people in distress. We will not forget the people, nor the countries who support our legitimate demands. According to international law, and economic privileges will be given to the parties that support us today to liberate our people from the ongoing brutal and illegal occupation. You know the situation very well. You know the mullahs very well. And I think the European countries or our European counterparts fully aware that the mullahs regime is no more trying to understand the legal systems of the European systems or the American systems or any other one in the world. They are just moving one line. Imagine the elected and non-elected President Ibrahim Raisi, who killed thousands of people in different parts of Iranian map, I can say, especially in Al-Ahwaz or Balochistan or Azerbaijan and Kurdistan. He has killed more than 5,000 innocent people. How I don't know how European countries are going to deal with this issue and deal with this man, or meet their, foreign minister who is not an educated person, who doesn't understand how to communicate politically or logically with the governments or his counterparts in Europe or any other parts of the world. This surprises me anyway, which we are requesting our European friends, European brothers and sisters, to take this seriously and understand the situation very well, that this regime is not going to help them at all. The oil and gas and fertile land belongs to Al-Ahwaz. Other resources belongs to Balochistan and Azerbaijan and Kurdistan. They are in the center. They have nothing to give. They are stealing from us and exporting to you or any other countries anyway. So all we are requesting you is, please, if you don't mind, just take this seriously, deeply look at it, twice thinking, and then take any steps that you wish. Of course, you are free to do whatever you want. We can't, impose anything on any friend in any part of the world. But this is just a brotherly or a fraternal, request from our side, who are suffering from thousands of problems. Imagine we are Ahwazi people, are the richest people of the Middle East. They live on less than $50 a day. Imagine who could live on less than $50 a day. It means 90 to 95% of our people are living under scratch, unfortunately. And the regime is fabricating against ASPLA, against the Arab Struggle Movement for the Liberation of Al-Ahwaz, and trying to just kill us to get rid of our activities. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for your valuable participation in this webinar, and wish you all the best and good luck. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalaf Al-Kaabi, Head of Foreign Affairs and Committee of Asmala Movement, for this amazing speech and for this invitation to European brothers and sisters and human rights defenders to be, let's say, very attentive to the Iranian's regime agenda within the Middle East, especially regarding the neighboring countries and regarding Al-Ahwaz, but also to show solidarity towards the Ahwazi people who are suffering from poverty, suffering from a water crisis, from an environmental crisis, and suffering also from persecution, human rights violations, and executions. So it's a message to the Iranian regime and message to the European Union, the international community, to stop executions in Iran and to defend the freedom of speech. Our next speaker is a European, but he calls himself a global citizen and human rights defender, Mr. Andy Vermouth, who is, let's say, an advocate for human rights at the age, he started very early, at the age of 10. He is living as a human rights defender in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and he is engaged in political and civil rights movements at the European level. He is defending women and minorities. He is defending all the marginalized peoples, especially in the Middle East. And he was also sent as a human rights activist and defender within the UN mission to so many parts of the world. So Mr. Andy Vermouth is speaking on behalf of IDEAL, International Alliance for the Defense of Rights and Freedom, but also on behalf of Post Versa. We thank you for being here today because he will be leaving at 6. He has another meeting, but thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Shalom. Marhaba. It was very beautiful that I've heard saying that we have to strive for unity. And I think we have to strive for unity, but not only for unity. Unity, truth, and justice. Oh, that's for me really important that we take these 3 things together. Thank you, Manel Salmi, for organizing this important conference. The Iranian government has continued to finance Hamas in ways that have directly contributed to the present problems in Gaza. Following the Gaza conflict, Hamas and other terrorist groups have killed more Israeli citizens than the whole 50-day war in 2014, despite firing almost as many missiles in half the time. Iran did never hold back with money, weaponry, and technical backing to allow these harsh attacks, according to Hamas Political Bureau Chairman Ismail Haniyeh on May 21. In a phone conversation with Haniyeh, 5 days later, Ismail Qani, head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, commended Hamas' efforts. This declaration was reiterated by Hezbollah and other significant Iran-backed armed groups, as well as the Houthis. Despite ideological differences, the compliment exchanges marks a year-long strengthening of relations between Iran's axis of resistance and Hamas. Hamas, a Sunni jihadist faction of the Muslim Brotherhood, issued an official charter vowing to destroy Israel and fight the warmongering Jewish people as they declared themselves. The organization developed high-level ties with Iran when Iran hosted 2 conferences on Palestine in 1990 and 1991. It was an antidote to the ongoing Arab-Israeli peace process and the Madrid summit in 1991. As a consequence, in 1992, the government of Yitzhak Rabin deported 480 Hamas leaders to Lebanon. It housed deported Hamas militants and trained them how to deconstruct and deploy suicide bombs, a technique Hezbollah pioneered. As soon as Rabin released them, Hamas and other Gaza-based groups began carrying out suicide assaults against Israel, and Iran began paying them up to $15 million per year. Hezbollah and Hamas were partners for most of the second of the Intifada from 2000 to 2005. During this time, Hezbollah made at least 3 substantial efforts to transport weapons and bomb makers into Gaza. As a result, unlike Hezbollah, Hamas has become a pragmatic ally in Iran's anti-Israel axis. The link was deepened by Iran's funding for Hamas missile development. Ahmed Hosseini, the IRGC missile commander, stated in 2014 that Hezbollah had equipped and trained Hamas terrorists years before all the attacks happened. He said that the IRGC commander, Hassan Tehrani Moghadam, he's deceased in the meantime, equipped and led them. After training these Hamas engineers, how to build rockets out of everyday objects like sugar and pipes, the organization started manufacturing its iconic short-range rocket, the Qassam. Following Israel's withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, Hamas began collecting unexploded bombs for the production of rockets. It received powerful missiles from Iran and Syria. By the end of the 2012 conflict, Hamas has started shooting Iranian Fajr 5 rockets into Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Following Israel's retreat from their respective regions, Hamas and Hezbollah tactics shift from suicide terrorism to rockets, mortars, anti-tank ambush operation supported by tunnels and civilian human shields to avoid retaliatory airstrikes. Iran created covert methods to provide such weaponry to Hamas. We should never forget that. With Omar all consent, several Sinai-based Bedouin traffickers bought commodities to Gaza through Sudan. But Bashir, he expelled Iranian ambassadors from Sudan in 2014, seeking for financial assistance from Iran's adversary, Saudi Arabia. Iran and Hezbollah have avoided the Israeli blockade by dropping floatable items for Palestinian fishermen to pick up along the Gaza coasts. According to not only Egyptian, but also Israeli intelligence sources, the Islamic State was willing to set aside the ideological animus for the apostate Muslim Brotherhood linked group in exchange for Hamas weapons, but also for Hamas training. However, the 2011 Syrian conflict strained Hamas-Iran relations as Tehran backed the Assad regime while Hamas supported Sunni Arab insurgents. Hamas strained relations further by embracing enemyship with Saudi Arabia in the Gulf coalition's fight against the Iran-backed Houthi group. Despite this, Iranian and Hamas officials met secretly on occasion, and Tehran backed the movement whenever Palestinians battled with Israel. However, Iran has reduced or ceased immediate direct payments to Hamas. Many methods were devised in order to replace the lost Iranian direct revenue. It requested financial assistance from Turkey and Qatar when the Libyan civil war erupted in 2011. Local and Israeli sources warned that Hamas was collaborating with Libyan weaponry dealers. Egyptian security forces captured 138 Grad rockets headed for Gaza from Libya in June 2012. Hamas has utilized Israeli civilian humanitarian assistance to further its military objective, using wooden panels and engines for tunneling and, of course, for bomb making. After Hamas appointed an Iran-friendly leader, Yahya al-Sinwar, in 2017, Tehran helped negotiate a compromise between Assad and Hamas. Sinwar said in August of that year that Iran was Hamas' largest financial and military supporter. Since then, the Iranians have boasted about improving the group capabilities. In January 2021, IRGC Aerospace Force Commander Amir al-Hajizadeh said all the missiles you see in Gaza and Lebanon were developed with Iran's backing. There seem to be supplies from Libya, where intelligence sources have warned that Iran is transferring weaponry to Gaza through Libya, with the help of Turkey and Qatar, who are implicated as well in this struggle. The new Iranian support for Hamas has increased operational and productional capabilities. Or at the commencement of the latest fights, the EDF estimated that Hamas and other Gaza groups possessed up to 15,000 missiles. Hamas has bolstered its arsenal by basing its own missile designs on Iranian models. It's also built and flew 6 Shahab kamikaze drones, which are very similar to Iran's Ababil model. It could launch up to 27 missiles per minute against targets as far away as Tel Aviv, overwhelming Israeli missile defense and increasing casualties. According to Israel's Home Front Command head, Major General Uri Gordon, the country is seeing its highest number of rockets assault in history. Throughout the current conflict, Iranian proxies in the Middle East held and provided military aids to Hamas. On May 16, the leader of the Iran-backed militia, Kataib al-Imam Ali, stated that Iraqi forces had been deployed to fight Israel, though he did not disclose where. On May 25, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah characterized Hamas' action as a historic step in the war with the enemy. Consequences: Iranian financing aided Hamas in launching a military campaign in Gaza. To prevent Hamas from rearming, the American administration should maintain a strict surveillance apparatus, including in-person import control until the region has been repaired. The group has been known to build record rockets of seemingly innocuous materials. It is also critical to collaborate with Egypt to obstruct the transit of material via Libya or Sudan. An alternate tactic would be to counter Iran's growing influence in the Middle East. The American administration might help by aiding Arab states and Israel in additional normalization agreements, enabling them to work on counterterrorism, anti-smuggling, and other activities to prevent Iranian disruptive behavior, specifically Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Oman are also being approached by Iran. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy Vermout from IDL, for your amazing speech and for this important data, and for also reminding us about the militia, Iran militia in the Middle East, especially the Houthis, the Hamas and Hezbollah, and all the implications of this militia in destroying the Middle East and in the consequences of that. And Mr. Andy was in United Nations in Geneva, was discussing about the implications of the Houthi and how it really destroyed the lives of women and children. And it was one of the biggest humanitarian crises that children witnessed in the 21st century, especially the children of Yemen. Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you, Manuel, for having me. Yes.
Our pleasure to have you. So our next speaker is Mr. Nigel Goldrich from Impact. So Andy spoke about Abraham Accords and the peace deal in the Middle East, which is really promising, and we really welcome it. Also, Dr. Khalaf spoke about that. So I think that this is a very positive note in 2020, 2021, despite so many wars in the Middle East, but we have we have hope and peace with the Abraham Accords. And Mr. Nigel Goldrich is also working on international movement for peace and coexistence. He's the CEO of Impact, and he will be speaking about I suppose, peace and coexistence, and also fighting against terrorism. And he is a human rights defender and really engaged in fighting against extremism and terrorism. Nigel Goldrich, thank you for coming today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manel. Everybody can hear me? Very good. Thank you. Very good. I'm sorry, I should be Patricia Teitelbaum, our chair, but she is not available today, so you will have to make do with me. Thank you for those who have spoken. Thank you, Andy Vermouth, for saying 95% of what I was going to say, but saying it better than I could probably say it. Let me just start with this very quickly then. I remember the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Who else remembers that? The Iranian Revolution, absolutely. Some of us remember it. I was a university student, and in 1979, all of a sudden, in the autumn, at the beginning of my second year, we had students from Iran for the first time. And of course, these were refugees, some of them from the minorities that some of you represent. And I got speaking with some of them, and they said to me, you know what's going to happen, Nigel? This new regime in Iran, they're going to try to infiltrate Western institutions as a way of spreading influence and undermining Western liberal values. And in particular, somebody said to me who was studying education at the time, he said, they are likely to infiltrate faculties of education and learning to use Western language and concepts against itself. I found that very interesting as an undergraduate. So several years later, when I did my first master's, I studied Islam, and my thesis was on Islamic epistemology and British educational praxis. I'm British. The thesis was about what Islamic epistemology, its theory of knowledge, actually is. And I compared its enlightened iteration in centuries gone past, where the arts and science flourished in Islamic countries, with what was beginning to happen in Iran, namely a fundamentalist and theocratic iron fist theory of knowledge. And I did quite a bit of research, of course, for my master's, and I realized and studied conferences that were going on in the Islamic world with titles like Issues in the Islamic Movement. I think it should have been called the Islamist Movement. And so in 1983, I concluded in my thesis that what would happen is that Western liberal values would be undermined in state schools in the United Kingdom by Islamists claiming for Islam the same rights that Christian and Jewish schools had, namely to be funded by the state, but to be controlled by the religious authorities. Now, of course, in English and Scottish schools and Jewish and Christian schools reflect liberal values by and large, open inquiry, science, and so on and so forth. But I predicted exactly what happened, namely that there would be forces that would claim state funding for Islamic schools, which would in effect become madrasas, which would radicalize the young in a fundamentalist Islamist way, and this would cause problems. It would be done with the collusion of Western liberals and the establishment, which would, in their wearing their rosy-colored spectacles, see it as a movement towards what it called multiculturalism. But I argued that multiculture doesn't exist. that you have a dominant culture, and that there would be a separation. And this is, in fact, what has happened, not just in the United Kingdom, but we're seeing it, of course, here in Belgium, where there are no-go areas in schools with 95% Muslim populations, where Arabic materials coming from Turkey, as it happens now, are being used with virtually no supervision. So students who I met all those years ago at university warned me, because they saw what was coming. And in a sense, that was a wind, and we're now reaping the whirlwind. Now, I have quite a lot of Iranian friends, all of them refugees. One of them said to me that Tehran is investing heavily in its universities, and Tehran University in particular, some of you, I'm sure, will know about this, in its education departments, so that there will be a massive infiltration in Western media and academia to undermine our European values. And it is so ironic to see the European Union pluck some of these values out of thin air and declare, without any democratic process, that these are the values of Europe, and then precisely ignore them, the European Council and the European Commission, when it ignores the pleas of the European Parliament, which is elected to stand by the oppressed in Iran. So it seems to me that we cannot rely on the European Council. We cannot rely on the European Commission, for they are driven by pragmatism and politics. All we can do as NGOs, international NGOs, as advocates for peace and coexistence, is to press the Parliament to push for proper action on behalf of the European Council. Now, I've written down some arguments here about the dangers of a nuclear Iran. I don't think I need to rehearse these with anybody here. I think we are all very well aware of the emboldening of the regime that a nuclear capacity is going to give the Iranian regime. And we can't rely upon the European Union to do anything. It doesn't have an army. I don't think we can rely on Biden. Do you? Does anybody here? We're going to have to rely on Israel. And that's the awful future. There will be, as our first speaker said, there will be bloodshed. There will be violence. There will be death, surely, in order to achieve peace. And this time is coming, and it's coming quickly, and it's coming soon. And we have to be prepared for it as much as we can be. I don't see any other prognosis for how we can build a common future with people who support democratic values, except by stopping in its tracks the nuclear capacity, imminent capacity of the Iranian regime. Our first speaker gave us a very realistic and a very chilling prognosis. I can do no other than that. We will stand with the Iranian people. We will stand with the oppressed. We will continue to turn out on the streets. We will continue to write letters. We will continue to lobby. But it's going to take more than that. And it looks to me like there has to be military action. And that's what I fully expect to happen sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nigel Goldrich from Impact. I would like also to thank Patricia, who was not available today, unfortunately, but she also supported us in demonstrations, and she made very good speeches in supporting the Ahwazi and non-Iranian populations. Thank you for your speech. It was very inspiring, especially regarding the infiltration of Western institutions by Iran. And I think that we already know that there is a huge lobbying, especially in Washington, regarding Iranian institution. And of course, as you said, what we can do is to press the parliament to push for more action. And this is thanks to NGO, human rights activists, and also thanks to people like you working for peace and coexistence. Our next speaker is also a fully engaged human rights activist and lawyer. He is the president of a political party. He is also working very closely with the other non-Iranian population. Mr. Salah Kamrani, he is the head of Azerbaijan Central Party and a human rights lawyer. Mr. Salah Kamrani was also a victim of the Iranian regime because he is really an activist who is working for the interests of his people. And he was a prisoner of conscience, and he is also the founder of the Azerbaijani Central Party. He was harassed by the security forces, repeatedly harassed by security forces, who have been threatened for his activity. In 2005, he went to Urmia with his brother to defend the rights of the next national cultural activist. In Urmia, midnight, Iranian special forces raided the home and arrested him and his brother. After completing the military service, starting to work, Salah Kamrani is also pursuing a master's degree of Shiraz University. He has been active in the creation of the Shiraz University Turkic Language Students Association and the Turkic and Persian language newspaper as an editor-in-chief. Then as a lawyer, he tried to defend the rights of Azerbaijani national cultural activists, Abbas Lizani, Hamid Imran, Said Musavi, Hidayat Zakir, etc. He also defended their rights in court as an Arab national activist and a member of the Iranian Writers Association. He is now doing a PhD in Kyiv University on political science. And he is also working on, he has an independent channel, 24-hour ATV. So thank you, Mr. Salah, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Manal. Good evening for everyone. We are here to focus so much about the dangers of Iranian regime. If they get atomic bomb, what will happen? And the solution that we think we can stop the ambition of the regime. It is clear for every expert, at least, that Iran has exceeded the level, enrichment level that needs to get nuclear bomb. It has proved by the International Atomic Organization and other countries. From the 200 countries, as I traced, just one country is really afraid and conscious about the Iranian regime's atomic ambitions. It is Israel. I think Israel in this struggle is alone. We can't trust, as one another lectures mentioned to Biden administrations. I can say the policy of maximum pressure of President Trump, it was working. But unfortunately, everything has changed all of a sudden. Mr. Biden, instead of keeping pressure on Iranian regime, he is unfortunately putting pressure over Saudi Arabia, over Turkey and other countries. It is very, very wrong. How we can do? If Iran's regime get the bomb, what will happen? First of all, they will begin atomic races in the region by Saudi Arabia, by Turkey, by Egypt, Azerbaijan, and others. What will happen? Iran will be boldened to boost its supported terrorist proxy groups such as Hezbollah, Houthi, and Hamas and others, and Husseiniyyun. You know, there is one another battalion they have created by terrorist Soleimani of Azerbaijan, Republic of Azerbaijan, I mean, in Syria, Husseiniyyun. They will destabilize all the Middle East, consequently, the European countries and all the world. It is very dangerous. The Iranian regime, they repeatedly, in high level, Khamenei threatened Israel to wipe out from the map. They threatened Azerbaijan one month ago. They will hit Azerbaijan by 4,000 rockets at the same time to wipe out all Azerbaijan from the map. Why? Because Azerbaijan is good ally for Israel. Because Azerbaijan has a multicultural community. Because Azerbaijan is the second safest home of Jews in the world after Israel. What is the problem with Azerbaijan? Azerbaijan is a sovereign country, has right to have relation with which country they will, including Israel. When they say Azerbaijan has relation, has collaborating with Israel, it has consequences for Azerbaijanian inside Iran, because we have 3 times bigger than independent Republic of Azerbaijan population inside Iran. South Azerbaijanian, they are playing the role of Ukrainian in the Soviet Union. It will be the beginning of collapsing of Iran's regime, at the same time collapsing of whole Iran, I hope. That's why Iran is very, very sensitive for the Azerbaijanian, because one step of Iran against Azerbaijan, whether the independent Azerbaijan or South Azerbaijan, it may shape all system of Iran. I have an example. When they began to threaten Azerbaijan last month in the borders of Azerbaijan by drilling, vast military drilling, soldiers, officers in Iran's army, they showed sign of grovel to threaten Iran. We are Azerbaijani, we are Turk. We're gonna not fight against our brothers in Azerbaijan. We're gonna fight against Iran's regime. It's very, very, very important. Last week, when other terrorist, Wahidi, the internal minister of Iran, would inaugurate the governor of South East Azerbaijan province, one of other Azerbaijani soldier, colonel, slapped. Why you are speaking Persian in Azerbaijan? It is against our culture. It is against our community's values. But how, until now, the world have been dealing with a problem and ambitions of Iranian's regime to get atomic bomb? They started to expose 2002, Iran has covered atomic or nuclear activities After that, they tried to impose sanction, and the most effective was, as I mentioned, the maximum pressure by the Trump administration. Also, we have at the same time seizure of more than 55,000 documents by Israel that Azerbaijan also was accused by Iran for collaboration with Israel. But none of them worked. Even though Iran's regime continued to get nuclear bomb, despite all misery of Iranian people. Why? They don't stop that. Because no legitimacy for Iran's regime, nothing important for Iran's regime, they will just get the bomb. It is the one solution for regime. That's why we are living now in very, very critical situation. Some countries, they are saying, okay, all options are on the table, even military action. But it is just a statement. No real action. No real action. What will happen if Iran gets nuclear bomb? They will destabilize all the region, Middle East region, South Caucasus, also European Union. European Union will face with the influx of migrants. It is very dangerous. I don't want to imagine with that. But what can be work better, as Mr. Mordechai mentioned? All people, if you want freedom, you have to work, you have to fight. But with whom? Fight with whom? Who is our alliance? Which country? As I'm going to be a little bit critical, even against Israel, against USA and European countries, that their values is my values also. Human rights, rule of law, democracy is my life's values. But what they have done to revive these values in Iran, in Middle East, what they can do, they have focused for some country, the guarantee of oil market, stability of oil market was important than existence of Israel, existence of non-Persian people in Iran, and others. It is notorious, to be honest. What they have dealt with the opposition groups of Iran. These countries, unfortunately, they concentrated for the old guard centrist opposition group, such as monarchists, such as Mujahideen Khalq, such as others. What they have done. In 24 July, we as Azerbaijani national movement that we are working under one umbrella with 9 parties. We call people to come to the street. People come to the street. For what? For give protect for Ahwazi brothers, to protect them. The main slogan was Azerbaijan, Al-Ahwaz Ittihad Ittihad. Azerbaijan, Al-Ahwaz, unite, unite. It was just Azerbaijanian. We are working together with Ahwazi people. We are working together with Baluch, with the Kurds even. Ahwazi people, they were alone. But after 10 days, we managed to be united, not mentally, not in politics, not in media, in the street. We protect each other. But we want other non-Persian people, Persian groups, centrist groups to join us. But they don't know. They don't do that. Especially centrist group, they are old guard groups. They are working at the same line with the regime in some respect. For example, they united themselves with Iran's regime when Iran had problem with Azerbaijan. Iran that recognized Azerbaijan as a front line of Israel in the South Caucasus. Monarchists, centralists, all of them, they stated, we are with Iran, with Iran's regime. It is like that. We hate Hitler, but because Hitler protect our territorial integrity, we have to be with Hitler. It is their conduction. We can't work with racist group. We can't work with racist group. They have just one, they have sentiment of Turkophobia, Arabophobia, anti-Semite. It is impossible. We have potential because just Azerbaijanian, they are constitute at least 1/3 of all population of Iran. Together with Baloch, together with Arab people, we are the main opposition. They are just centrist, not central. That's why I call for other countries, especially countries that are under danger of Iran. They have to open the eyes and shed light to reality of Iran to see who are working really, who care about rule of law, care about the stability, care about these kind of values. We haven't get any attention, any recognition. What we have witnessed, some countries, they are open very multimedia, mega media for monarchists, for others who they are racist. They are instead of fighting against regime, they are fighting against Azerbaijani, against Arab, against Kurd, against Baloch, against others. It is not acceptable. Mr. Mordechai mentioned in Charshamba Suri, if we can come together. Charshamba Suri is a symbol of racism, to be honest. But we can work together and choose one important day and to come to the street together. Unfortunately, old guard centrist groups, they are part of problem, not the part of solution. It is the problem. Why Iranian regime survived until now? Because of getting good support from the opposition, so-called opposition. It is the main problem, main obstacle. I don't tire you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening to me. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Salah Kamrani, the president of the Azerbaijani Central Party, for this speech. And thank you for stressing the fact that we need to fight against racism and discrimination if we want to come together. And anti-Semitism, of course, because in the Middle East, there are Abraham Accords, but we need to teach the people also to fight against anti-Semitism in the Middle East and to protect the minorities, Christian and Jews. Thank you so much. We move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Nasser Boladai, who was born and raised in Balochistan in Iran. He holds a master's degree in arts as well as degrees in linguistics and computer science. He has been a member of the editorial board of the Baluch and Persian magazine Tran, which is devoted to political and cultural discourse among Baluch and other Iranians. He has contributed to numerous articles on national self-determinations, people's sovereignty, federalism, and Baluchi language and literature, especially in the area of Baluchi folklore. Mr. Boladai is General Secretary of the Baluchistan People's Party. In July 2017, he was elected President of the Unrepresented Nations and People's Organization. Mr. Nasser Boladai, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mani. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I appreciate being with all the friends and the people that are here and listening to us. As I was mentioned here, I'm from Balochistan, and Balochistan is case to point what's happened when a nation loses to Iran, to the Iranian central government. The Baluch people has been an independent nation. If you go to the map for some years back, it was an independent country. First of all, it was occupied by the British at the time, but then it was divided between Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan before they left. And it was because of the Balochistan geopolitical location that they did that one, because at the time of before it was the Soviet, because of the great Russia for the great game, and later because of the Soviet, they didn't want the communists at the time to come to the warm water of the Arabian Sea, which in our region, we Baluch call it the Makran Sea, and the Arabian Gulf in the other region. And well, of course, the Iranian call it the Persian Gulf, or the Persian call it the Persian Gulf in that region. And Baluch live along that coast mostly. And it also extends to the part of the Afghanistan, currently the Nimruz province, and to some other part of the Afghanistan too. The thing is that during this time, the Iranian government has tried to destroy the Baluch way of life. It actually has tried to wipe out Baluch. Not only this current government, even the Pahlavi regime had those plans. It was expressed by the Iranian Prime Minister, Mr. Hoida at the time, and even Iranian Foreign Minister at the time, Abbas Khalatbari during the Shah's time. And we know what the Islamic Republic of Iran is doing during this Rouhani regime. They put a plan to change the Balochistan demography completely, to bring about 10 million more people to Balochistan, while, as it was mentioned here, like the Arabs, like the Kurds, like the Turkmen, and like Azerbaijani Turks. Baluch are one of those nationalities that suffer most, and more than maybe 80% live below poverty line. But still, the regime wants to bring other people in that region, and instead of giving job to the people already there. But their plan is to change the region. That's to wipe out the cultural, linguistic group of people that has been living in that region for about more than several years. We have been living in that region. During the Cyrus came to that region, or the Alexander came to that region. We fought all of those occupation, I don't know, imperial, or we call them, or anything, or despot. They tried to come to that region. We fought all of them, and then later the Arabs, and then the Portuguese, and later the Persian and the Punjabi, or anybody that wanted to occupy our region. We have been there for several centuries. And that shows, can you imagine Iran, when we are, I'm not going to more details about Baluch situation, I think everybody knows. The Iranian central government's policy inside the country is to make sure that they have one nation, one religion, as they say, and one history. And the Pahlavi the regime said, Mohammad Reza Shah, that Iran is a Persian country. Iran is inherited of the Persian Empire. Anybody that living in Iran is a Persian. So, as it was mentioned here, actually majority of the Iranians are not Persian. And later Khomeini said, anybody that living in Iran is, there is no millat, it is only ummat. That is to say, we have only one ummat, as he imagined himself as the leader or the religious leader of the whole Muslim world in the world. So that's the concept. I mean, the concept of the hegemony in Iran, it is both internal and external. It doesn't matter who is in government in Iran, because Iranian elite who is in government, they have indoctrinated in that there should be the hegemonists, there should be supremacists, not only in Iran, but on the region. And as you can see, the current government in Iran, any people like the Baluch who could not have defended themselves from the Iraqis, from the Lebanese, Yemenis, and Syrian, how they are being destroyed. Of course, they have not managed to do the same thing to the Bahrain, to Saudi Arabia, and to the Israel, which they had many times expressed that they want to wipe it out of the map, like exactly like they are doing to the Baluch people or Arab people or Kurds, or they want to do to assimilate Azerbaijanis or Lor and Turkmen or other national minorities in Iran. And here is the topic is Iranian atomic weapon. Imagine Iran, now it has just because it's using the international kind of border to say that we have the sovereignty there, trying to suppress us. And as we know, the internal policy extend to the external policy. And imagine one day, if we open our eyes, based on how the Iran play with the European and the American, and they play all the time to make sure that Iran, that the European or American find some kind of excuse not to put more pressure to Iran. Not that Iran think that they want to, Iran was just give them the excuse not to put more pressure, and they will do that one because now they delay all the time this negotiation, but at the time they will make some kind of concession. They can extend this kind of not going to the United Nations or putting more pressure in Iran. And as we see it in this week, the same thing that's coming to the Brussels and instead of going to the Vienna. And imagine one day when we wake up and see that Iran has the atomic weapon. And that day, I think it not only we that have experienced what Iran is doing to the people that cannot defend themselves, Iranian state or Iranian government, and then that they already have all, as they say, they are created a resistance movement, as they call it. And then what they would do, they will start with a smaller country in the Gulf, like Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and continue to Saudi Arabia. And of course, Israel too, because they wanted to have an extension from Tehran to Lebanon, which they had before, but through the Syria, now they have a larger kind of geographical control in that region. They are trying to build their proxies in the Syria, which they already have in Lebanon. And of course, I think in the protection of the nuclear weapon, Iran will try not only destabilize those countries, but they want to wipe it out. And their plan is a complete hegemony in that region, based on their own kind of idea of one kind of language or one religion. And for them, it is the Shiite religion and Persian language, and destroying all other nationalities. It doesn't matter. Some people say here sometimes that we have a kind of unity with Iran because of it is Jewish people and Iran previously this and that. I mean, of course, so many people have been in different times. People never had any problem with the other. No Persian, no Jewish, no Baluch, no Arab, no Turks. But the Iranian kind of identity of this imperialistic identity that we have in Iran, this is against everybody, be it Turks, be it Arabs, be it Jewish and Israelis. Or we have experienced it practically inside Iran, so we do not have to say anything. But I think one has to imagine the day that Iran has the atomic weapon and what kind of havoc, what kind of destabilization, what kind of problem we will see in the Middle East. That day, I think we should all try that it should not come. And that makes us that all of us come together and work together and use the abilities that we have, both inside and outside, to make sure that the Iranian regime or this kind of political system that we have in Iran collapses, and it gives the people their right. The people, we are asking for our rights. We are asking for different setup. It depends how the other, nationalities in Iran would react. But I think it should be according to the United Nations a common agenda that has been going on for some times, that people that do not have their own governance, their self-government, their autonomy, their self-determination, they should be guaranteed based on those kind of things. And we have, I think, the law in our side. But of course, everybody knows in politics, you have to have the power in your side. And we have to be united together, as was mentioned here. We Baluch amongst ourselves, and the Turks and Arabs and Turkmen and Lor, and make sure that we have a kind of a very united agenda, empowerment of the national minorities, because in politics, everything will be based on the power. So we have to have power and to change this regime and make sure the national minorities get the right for their self-determination and creating a better future, not only for themselves, for the region. And as we all imagine a world, we are living, I'm, for instance, now living in Europe. One day, nobody has thought that the British and the French will be kind of friends. But today, they are friends, or German and French. And one day, we wish that we have this possibility of everybody traveling everywhere, from Balochistan to Israel, from Azerbaijan to Jordan, without any fear or without any problem of being harassed or attacked by the terrorists of the Iranian government, which wants to just, their ambition is just to destabilize region, and they think they can create, in this way, they can kind of create their hegemonical regime or kind of hegemonical imperial government in that region. And that's, I think, we all have to work together to deter as soon as we can. Otherwise, we all will have problem. And that's, I think, the things that we are all gathered here. And hopefully we continue these discussions and become more united and create a peace, or create a path for the peace and the stability in the region and coexistence. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nasser Bouladai, the president of the Baluchistani party, People's Party. So thank you for your remarks, pertinent remarks, especially regarding what the Iranian regime is doing right now is trying to always to find excuses to the US and the EU. And we should raise awareness about that, is that always trying to put pressure to come back to the Iran deal. And I think that our objective here is to raise awareness and to to put pressure and to press for more action in the region. And of course, I like your optimism, and I like your idea of traveling within the Middle East without fear and without being attacked, and fostering for a new generation for peace and coexistence. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is in his way, so we have more or less 5 minutes to welcome Mr. Mandi Safadi from the Safadi Center. But in the meantime, we can move into the Q&A session. So if there are any questions, maybe for our speakers, for our panel of experts, we will be happy to take your questions before giving the floor to Mr. Safadi, to Mr. Mandi Safadi. Maybe any questions for the speakers, or maybe a question to, maybe the speakers would like to ask questions to each other.
Well, let me add one comment.
Yes, Doctor.
We actually gathered here in order to discuss the nuclear issue. The only way to direct or to make sure that the Iranian regime does not develop a nuclear military device is credible threat. No agreement will stop them, because they cheat, they lie, they deceive, and behind the back, they do whatever they like. They are the best chess players in the world. They are the best merchants of the bazaar. And this is why already almost 20 years ago, I warned in an article which was published by the Jerusalem Post, everyone who believes them to stop believing them, because they are compulsive liars. And they will sign whatever you like, they will agree whatever you like, but they do whatever they like. The only thing which can stop them is a credible threat. And what do I mean by credible threat? A credible threat is a letter which will be sent to them, let's say by the American president, whoever it is, saying very simply dear mullahs, your time is over and the game is over. We don't believe one word you say. You have exactly 1 week to dismantle all the facilities in Parchin, in Iraq, a whole list. All the nuclear military program, in Natanz, of course, to dismantle everything and to ship everything out to us. You have exactly 1 week to do the job, all the centrifuges and everything which you have there. You have exactly 1 week to do it. And at the end of this week, we start bombing you. The camps of the Pasdaran, all the government institutions in Tehran and other places as well, we are going to destroy everything which is connected to the regime. We will not leave a brick on a brick. And we are already around you. We warm the engines, read our lips, don't mess with us, because we are going to wipe you off. And we are serious. We mean what we say and we say what we mean. Don't call us and we will not call you. You have exactly 1 week. Go. If they understand that this letter is serious and the civilized world will do to them exactly what they say in that letter, they will take it seriously and they dismantle everything, because they are not suicidal. They want to survive as a people, as a regime, as a group of mullahs. They want to survive. They don't want to sacrifice themselves. And this is why the more credible this threat is, the less are the chances that it will really be implemented, because the regime will comply. And I know it, because this is how they acted at least 3 times in their history. And if there is time, if Mandi is not here, I can mention these 3 occasions. Is Mandi here?
He is not here yet, so go ahead, Doctor. Thank you.
The first one was in 1979, or 1980 actually, after they bursted into the American embassy in 1979, and they captured 52, I think, of the American diplomats, who were mainly intelligence CIA activists. Okay. Now, they were diplomats with a diplomatic visa, and you cannot put them in jail. You can maybe tell them to go out, but you cannot imprison them. But they were kept in the prison for 444 days, more than a year and a half, 444 days. When were they released? They were released in the same minute which President Ronald Reagan, incoming President Ronald Reagan, stood on the lawn of the White House swearing allegiance to the Constitution as a president. Now, why did they release the boys? Because President Reagan said that the first thing which he's going to do when he goes to the White House as a president is to take care of the Iranians, means the regime. And they understood, take care of them, that he will destroy them if they don't release the American diplomats. So they released them. When he was standing on the on that lawn in the White House, the airplane which carried these 52 people left the Iranian airspace. And this is what I mean by credible threat. They believed him that he will take care of them. So they released the boy without money, without anything, without anybody released, anybody, you know, from America, nothing. They just sent him out. This is one occasion. The second occasion was in 1988, at the end of the war between Iran and Iraq. The Americans, by mistake, shot down an Iranian airplane above the Gulf. And it was a tragic mistake because the Americans thought that it's something else. However, Khomeini thought that America joins Iraq in that war. And against Iraq, he cannot do anything. Against America, he cannot do anything. And he understood that he has to swallow the poison that he said, because he understood that America joins Iraq in the war against Iran. So he took out the white flag and he finished the war. It was a mistake by the Americans, but he understood it as a threat to Iran to stop the war. So he stopped the war. The third occasion was in 2003, when America and NATO and Australia, Syria also, Saudi Arabia helped them, invaded Iraq in March 2003 because Saddam did not comply to the Americans. The Americans were talking about finishing that war in 3 months, means to leave Iraq after 3 months. This is what they thought in the beginning. And they are going to continue to march on Iran and or Syria to take care of the Iranian regime and the Assad regime, because they didn't love both of them. In 2003, because of this invasion of Iraq, the Iranian regime stopped developing the nuclear device, the nuclear weapon. Why? Because they were afraid that the Americans will continue after Iraq, they will continue to Iran. And this is why they stopped it temporarily for like 3 years. The 3 years, the Iranians supported the Iraqi insurgency against the Americans. And the Americans caught Iranians in Iraq. The Americans caught Iraqis who went to Iran and came back after being trained in Iran. The Americans caught Iranian weapons, Iranian ammunition. And the Americans had all the evidence that the Iranian regime supports the Iraqi insurgency against the Americans. But the Americans did not do anything against Iran along those years of between 2003 and 2006. So the Iranian regime understood that America doesn't mean to invade Iran. So they resumed the developing of the nuclear military program. Means that as long as they were afraid that America will march on Iran, they didn't develop it. Once they understood that this threat doesn't exist anymore, they continued. And this is why I understand from these 3 occasions, the diplomats, the airplane, and the invasion of Iraq, that only credible threat will stop the Iranians' march to the bomb. Unfortunately, even President Trump, even he did not direct such a threat to the Iranians. Did not. He thought that the sanctions will do the job. He didn't understand that in a dictatorship, sanctions do not work because the sanctions are directed to the people, not to the regime. And he didn't understand it. Unfortunately, in my humble view, they will acquire a nuclear bomb. They will. It might take time. It might take all kinds of casualties, but they will have it. And the world has get used to the idea that Iran is nuclear. Mandi Safadi is here. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Yes, shukran. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mordechai, for these remarks and for your input regarding how to deal with the Iranian regime and how to deal with dictatorships. Unfortunately, with the sanctions that President Trump put on the Iranian regime, it worked to an extent, but as you said, the Iranian people suffered a lot from these sanctions. But of course, with such a dictatorship, you need to be firm and very straightforward. My next and final speaker who has joined us, and he is really he was really traveling, so thank you so much, Mr. Mandi Safadi, for joining us. He is the head of the Safadi Center for International Diplomacy, Research, Human Rights and Public Relations, a lecturer and expert on Islamic affairs, terrorism, Syria and the Middle East. He has published numerous articles and served as a political and strategic advisor about the Arab Spring and the Syrian Revolution. Previously, he was the chief of staff in the office of the Deputy Minister for the Development of the Negev and Galilee and Regional Cooperation, and he served as a link between officials in the government and the Syrian opposition. I would like to welcome Mr. Mandi, and I give you the floor, and thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for supporting also the Ahwazi and non-Iranian communities and peoples in their quest for freedom. And thank you for most of the time signing letters to the European Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you for all of you. Good evening. Yeah, the situation in the Middle East can be changed only we can stand very strong against the Iranian regime, the terror regime in Iran, and we have to find the way how we cooperate together to find the enough power to do that, because Iran, you know that they not a regular country. They're not the regular regime. They are a terror regime. That means they don't care if the United Nations or the European Parliament angry about what they do for against the Ahwaz, against the people in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Lebanon. They don't care what the other say, because they have a mission and they ideology. They want to deal as a ideology, their ideology way, and their ideology, I think. In few books, I read that they have to make damage in the area, in the countries to come the Mahdi al-Muntadhar. That means They don't care if they make a damage in Iraq, in Syria. It serves their ideology. Okay, so as an Israeli, I see only the cooperation between Israel, the Gulf countries, and oppositions in Iran and in Iraq and in Syria and in Yemen and Lebanon. Only when we cooperate together, we can change the material, we can stop the terror of Iran. The Ahwazi people inside the country, they can do a lot of things. I don't say that to make attacks. Maybe the information which we get from them can help us more than the attacks, what they can do inside, or the other activities, what they do. Because you see that Israel don't afraid from Iran, and we bomb them in Syria, in Iraq, and also inside Iran. And you hear about what we do with the archive of Iran. We take a lot of very important information from the archive of Iran, and we move it to Israel, and we show all the world the liars of the regime of Iran. So we can see. We can make the strategic plan, how to deal, how to work, how to move ahead in these activities, because the only activity in the Zoom and in letters and in activities like that, it's not enough, and can't give us the solution what we look for. So we have to plan our activities. We have to plan our strategy, and to start with the discussion with the Gulf countries, with Israel, with Russia, and with the United States. The regime of the United States today, I don't believe them that can make any activity against Iran, because they have closer ideology of Obama. So I don't see how United States make the steps against Iran, and they try to negotiate with them, which can give them to back to the world and we have to think about our strategy, our activities. And I'm ready. I told Manal before that I'm ready for any activity that you need, and I stand with you anyway. And I think my friend Mordechai Kedar, we will do together for your visit in Israel. Maybe we can make the delegation of 4 or 5 people, which come and meet with the government, with the member of Knesset, with the people which take the decision in Israel. So we start to plan that, and I hope that it's one first step in our activity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mandi. Thank you for your speech, and thank you for your help and your support to the Ahwazi cause and to the non-Iranian peoples. And especially thank you for sharing this, piece of wisdom and advice, which is information is power. So sharing information between the different non-Iranian peoples and Gulf countries and all these countries which suffer from Iranian invasion will be very helpful to work together and to be cooperating in terms of so many of sharing information and in terms of building relationships and building a strategy for the future. So we come to the end of this webinar. I don't know if any of the speakers or any of the participants has a comment or a question.
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Mr. Nasser, go ahead. I'll let it talk to you.
Just I wanted to make a comment on Mr. Kedar's comment about the Iranian government using kind of being very united and threatening, and it will stop its nuclear kind of development. I think it will maybe temporarily will do that one, as it had done before. But I think until this regime is there, or the Iranian central government hegemonic policy, that is the Tehran mindset, is supremacy and imperialistic vision exists there, no matter which government is there, Iran will develop nuclear weapon and will create problem for the region. So I think it will only, as it has shown, it will only temporarily put a stop in that one and will start it again and will hide so many things. So I think the current Iranian government is much more kind of sophisticated than Saddam Hussein in that regard. Even Saddam didn't accept that one. Even he didn't have the nuclear weapon capacity at the time. But I think the Islamic Republic is much more sophisticated. And as you say, they can lie to your face without that you will understand that they are lying or telling the truth. So that's why I think we have to be much more careful. And we have to make sure that we do not have this government. And we have to make sure the national minorities, oppressed nationalities in Iran are empowered to make sure that they do not let Iran use their territory or their resources against their own, against ourselves and against the region and against the people in the world. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a comment on that one.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nasser Bouladai. I don't know if any other participant or speaker would like to add something.
Yes. I have only one request.
Mr. Yes. Please go ahead. I'm just...
Manal, if you can share the contact information between us so we can continue corresponding with each other. If somebody doesn't like, it's okay.
Yeah, we can make a WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Maybe a WhatsApp
possible,
right.
Possible.
So Manal,
WhatsApp group.
A WhatsApp group of all the participants here.
That is possible. You know, I would like just to thank everyone anyway. You know, I was just telling a friend of mine, if you really want to have a peace of mind, then you have to get rid of these mullahs in Iran. First of all, as long as these guys are there will be no peace in the Middle East and in any other part of the world. They keep working and working. As Mr. Kedar said, they're lying. They are lying and lying and lying. They are just talking to you, signing contract. They go beyond or behind the scene. They do something else. So I think getting rid of this, you know, we need to get united all together. We need a real support. Ahwazi people need a real support from the international community, from the deep states of, you know, in the Middle East countries, without naming the countries. United States should take some steps. Europeans should take some steps, you know, in order to get rid of these guys in the Middle East. And I think, you know, signing contracts, nuclear deal contract with Iran is a big, big mistake. They should think twice before, you know, putting their fingers on papers or their pen on papers. So we have to take all the precautions in length before, taking any step towards normalization with this. I can say, sorry to say that, dirty regime and filthy regime. They are dangerous. They are not human. They are against humanity, against everything. And they are not something, important we have to emphasize on is these guys are not religious. Some people are talking about Islam or Muslims. They are not religious. They are aliens. They are not Muslims. They are not Sunnis. They are not Shia. They are not Christians. They are not Jew. They are something else anyway. They're against.
Yeah, but
Jews.
they use the regime. They use the regime.
They are using that. They're using it. They are against Jews, against Muslims, against Shia, against Sunnis, against Christians, against humanity. So that's why we have to take them very dangerous. So we have to work together. As Dr. Kedar mentioned, yes, we have to create a group, exchange views, and see how we can really build up some strategies in connection with this matter. Thank you very much once again, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I would like to thank all the speakers, all the participants. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. And we will continue working together, sharing information, and especially collaborating and having more, let's say, platform to share this information and to raise awareness in the media in Europe and the US and also in the Middle East, because I think that we need also a media attention at this level. Thank you so much, and God bless you, and have a blessed Friday and Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.